Hi, welcome to Quilts on Tour. Today I want to show you how to put on a border on a quilt that you've made. Specifically if you have quilt blocks and you don't have a pattern, this is how you can add the border. Super simple, easy to do. Make sure you check out our video where we learned how to put on the sashing and the cornerstones. So the first thing that you'll need is a measuring tape. And when you are adding borders, you always add the sides and then the top. So we're going to measure for our sides first. This thing's a little loud. So you measure in 3 places. You start on one end and you measure down. And this is 47 inches. And I usually write it down because I have a hard time remembering. So 47 inches on that side, and then you go from the middle and measure as well. And this one is 46 and a half. 46 and a half. And then you measure the other side. And this is 46 and a quarter. So this is where fun math comes into play. So we are going to add them all up and get the average. And that's what we want the length of our borders to be. So we take our fun fancy calculator here. 546.25 divided by 3. So 46 and a half is what we want the length of our borders to be for the sides. And we're going to make them 3 inches. I like my borders to be 3 inches. Personal preference. You can make them as wide or as small as you want. You can do 2 or 3 borders. Totally up to you, but I like the look of one border, especially when the quilt is pretty busy. I like just the one border. So mine's going to be 3 inches. So I'm going to cut 2 pieces of fabric, 3 inches by 46 and a half. Okay, so we have our border strips for the sides cut. And I'm going to show you how to attach them to your quilt. And this method you can use if you have a pattern or not. But this is how I attach my borders. You fold your quilt in half long ways because you want to find the halfway mark here. And this is really the only time that I use a pin because I want it to be accurate. So I will put a pin right in that crease. There. And then unfold it. And there's where our halfway mark on our quilt is. And then you take your border piece, and I cut mine on the fold, so I already know where the halfway mark is, but if I hadn't done that, you would do the same thing. Fold it in half and find where the half is, or the middle is. This fabric doesn't have a front or back, so either way it doesn't matter, but make sure if your border has a pattern that you lay right sides together. And then you line up your 2 creases here, your 2 middles, and I pin that together. Ow, I just stuck myself. That's why I don't use pins. And then you take it, my table's a little small, and you pull it. Let me get my pin. So as you can see, it's not quite, because we averaged it, so it's not quite all the way to the edge, which is okay. So we're going to pull it to the edge like that and clip it. And then you find the middle of that and clip it. And I need to get these clips. And I just clip it really well because what we're going to be doing is pulling this blue fabric a little bit as we sew to make it fit. And this helps when putting your quilt together, keeping it square, which is why you do the average so that it's square. But this side is almost perfect. Lines up almost perfect. Which is good. You don't have to fight on this one. And then in the middle. Alright, so now I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. Fold it in half. Find your middle. Mark it with a pin. Border piece in the middle, pin those together. Again, make sure your edges are lined up. This end. Line it up. So, I don't know if you noticed, so this side was the one that was longer on our, when we did the other side, but on this side it's pretty even. So, when we attach the border like this, this is how it keeps square and your same, so your quilt doesn't end up going like this to the side. If you just measured each side and put on whatever measurement that was, it would end up looking wonky because one side was almost a ½ inch longer than the other side. So this helps keep your quilt straight and square. I hope that makes sense. All right, I'm just going to sew right down these, and I do this at a ¼ inch seam. And I usually put the blue side or whatever your border fabric's going to be down in the machine, because then I can make sure that all the seams don't get caught and you don't get that bumpy, lumpy stuff on your quilt. So let me sew these down and then we'll show you how to do the top. So if you're finding when you come to the area where you've pinned or clipped and your top fabric is either shorter or longer than your underneath your border fabric, you want to make sure not to remove the clip before you've kind of adjusted the fabric, because this, to keep your quilt square, you're going to need to adjust some of your length in your quilt top fabric. So what usually helps me is if I kind of pull, I'm not yanking on it, I'm just kind of holding it up on the bottom, especially if I need the bottom fabric to be a little longer than the top. If I need the top to be a little longer, I'll kind of pull it from the top like this. But instead of going like this, when I sew, I always hold it up. It just helps with the tension and helps keep everything square. And if you're an experienced quilter, you're probably wondering why you can see so much of my border fabric underneath this square. This square wasn't exactly 10.5 inches when it was sent to me, so I need to kind of adjust a little bit for that, which is why you can see. Normally you wouldn't see that, and I just wanted to explain that so you didn't think I was sewing crooked. Alright, now we're just going to flip it over and sew the other side. So here you can see the top fabric is a lot looser than what my bottom fabric is. And I don't want there like to be puckers or tucks. So what I'm going to do is leave it clipped, but I'm going to kind of tug on my blue fabric underneath so that it stretches a little bit and then lays flat with this square here. See, there's not that bubble now. And I'm just pulling on this blue fabric. And because this blue fabric doesn't have any seams, it doesn't really give as much. So that's when you just kind of work with it a little bit. Because this is the end that was a lot long, like a half an inch longer. So we're trying to hide that half an inch a little bit. Is what I'm trying to do. And see, you can see now the top fabric isn't quite as loose as it was. We've kind of hid it, as I say. And as you can see, when we get to the bottom now, because I've used so many clips to try to hold it, and I've tried to work that extra fabric up in the quilt, our edges line up. So that's how we keep the quilt square. So don't be afraid to use a lot of clips or pins if that's what you use. The more you use, the more your fabric will stay where you want it to be sewed. I hope that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to set my seams and press these open. Again, it doesn't matter for the border which way. If you've got a dark border, you can press it toward the dark. If your border's light, I would press it the other way. But it's up to you. So let me press these open and then we'll measure for the top. Okay, so we have our side borders sewn on. So now we got to measure for the top, and it's kind of the same process. We're going to measure the top from the top. And this is, let's see, 41 3/4. I mean, 40 3/4. Make sure you write down the right number. And then the middle. And when you're measuring, make sure you don't pull and tug too much, because you don't want it to stretch. Because with all these seams, you can get different measurements if you're pulling and tugging too much. So I usually just lay it flat and then rub my hand along the edge. And this one says 40 1/2. And then the bottom. And this one is 40 3/4 too. So we're going to do the same thing and just take the average. 40.75 plus 0.5 plus 40.75. Divide that in thirds. So we're like 40.67. So I'm going to cut my strips a little bit bigger than 40 and a half because it's 40.6. So yeah, 40 and 2/3. So I'm gonna cut those and then we'll get them ready to be sewed on. All right, so here's my little tip for when you're cutting with a long ruler. It's kind of wide. Go in little chunks so you can hold it down and it doesn't move. And if you kind of put your pinky on the outside like this, it also keeps it from moving. So I usually just do little chunks at a time. All right, so here we are with our side borders attached and our top borders cut. And you attach these the same way, where you bring your sides together and you find your middle. Sometimes, like this one, the middle is an actual seam, which kind of makes it easy. Open it up. And again, because I cut on the fold, I know that that's the middle. If it wasn't, then I would, like if you have really long borders for a big quilt and you have to piece together pieces, you're gonna have to fold it in half and find the middle. I'm gonna line those up and pin. And again, start with your edge. So you never want to pin the middle and then just work your way down. You want to pin the middle, then pin the side, then pin the middle between those two. Like that. All right, let's do the other end. All right, so I'm going to sew these down and we can see what it looks like finished. Again, remember to sew with your border fabric facing down on your machine. It'll be easier to keep your seams flat that way from your blocks. I'm just going to press these open here in a few minutes, but there you have it. Your top and your bottom borders are added. So make sure you leave a question in the comments if you have any. I'd love to try to answer them for you, or if you have any comments about how you put on your borders, any hints or tips or tricks, I would love to hear from you. So if you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you want more videos, make sure you subscribe. And thanks for watching.